Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all the public committee reports, including details of specific recommendations, are available on Angus Council's website. Item 1. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Convener, there's apologies from Councillors Clark and Councillor Doran, and their substitutes today is Councillor Breeze and Councillor Gall.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? Nope, doesn't appear to be any. 3, moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed? Agreed. And number 4, Local Housing Strategy 23 to 28, a progress update. And I'll hand over to Catherine to introduce.
Thanks, Convener. This report provides an update on the delivery of the This report provides an update on the delivery of the local housing strategy for the period 2023 to 2028. It highlights the progress made in the key areas of future focus, particularly in relation to the vacant stock across all tenures, improving housing conditions, particularly in the private sector, delivering more accessible and specialist housing, and continuing to respond to the housing emergency declared by members in June 2024. I'd like to open it up for questions.
Okay, any questions, anybody? Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Turning to page 39, looking at the assessment of the current and future housing needs for health and social care client groups. What engagement is the Council having with local kind of third sector groups regarding this? I'm thinking about South Angus parents of adults with learning disabilities as a kind of key example.
Thanks for the question. We are standing up a group to be convened shortly to specifically look at the housing needs for adults with learning disabilities, mental health problems and other disabilities to get a better picture of the need right across Angus and to make sure that we're able to respond to that local need. So that will include interaction with any third sector organisations.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Just a quick one. It's probably in relation to a recent issue that I had. Are there any plans to look at and refresh our policy on swaps between tenants and including between different local authorities? Thanks.
We have a policy that enables tenants to swap properties. I mean, it certainly is something that we could look at in terms of how we're publicising that. We are also looking at our downsizing policy to provide incentives for tenants that may wish to downsize to another property. So that's something that's in progress at the moment.
Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. It's on engagement again. There's a couple of things I'd like to know about. First of all, in Brechin, with regard to engagement with both the council tenants and the private owners. And the second one is just about that landlord seminar attached, which was attended in June, I think. Just wondering what kind of numbers you got to that. That was dealing with energy standards assistance and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of Brechin, there's two particular types of engagement we're doing there. One in relation to the council tenants and particularly those that are living within the blocks that are affected, and engaging with them over what their future housing needs are and whether or not they wish to remain in the area. And then also with the other owners that are affected within our council blocks. But there will also be some wider engagement in the whole area around housing in Brechin and what the community want to see for that area. So they're quite distinct needs that we have from those different consultation exercises that are going on to make sure that we are meeting our needs in terms of the housing revenue account and the use of assets for the housing revenue account, but also in our role as the Strategic Housing Authority and thinking about that bigger kind of place-making piece. So there's kind of different needs coming from there. Sorry, what was the second question?
It was about the landlord seminar that was held in June. Maybe you can't answer that one, but I was just wondering what kind of uptake there was at that seminar, because it's really vital that private landlords know what they have to do in terms of energy conservation, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got Colin McGarver on the call who may be able to answer that question. Colin, do you have some more detail on that?
I do. Afternoon. I do have more detail on that. It's not good listening though, because there were actually 0 landlords turned up to that event with Home Energy Scotland. So we're obviously going to have to look at how we market and advertise the schemes as we go forward. We did have a similar event in February, which was well attended. So I think we're up to about a dozen landlords back then.
Can I just have a follow-up on the first one about the homeowners? Was that done on a one-to-one basis or was it done in groups? Do you know that?
So we're offering a one-to-one appointments for people who are directly affected by any proposals around flood-affected properties.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. Just to ask Catherine, do you have any information on whether you were able to access Scottish Government funding for empty homes officers and how that will be used, and also on the application of any council tax levy that we are collecting in for second homes?
Yeah, certainly. We have been in dialogue with the Scottish Government around empty homes work, and we are looking to introduce an empty homes officer post within the structure, and that would be funded by the Scottish Government for a period of 1 year. So we have set that in train to take up that funding with them. In terms of the council tax levy, we collect monies through the council tax levy, as you say, and that money goes into what we call our affordable housing revenue account, and that is kept as a separate account to the HRA, and we've used that for a variety of purposes around new supply and also empty homes. One of the things that we are intending to do when we have that new empty homes officer resource in place is to look again at how best to utilise that money to attract people to bring properties back into use. So there's definitely more work to do there in terms of other incentives that we can bring forward.
Just come back on that's excellent. It's really good to hear, and I meant to say it's really good to see the progress in the report. Thanks.
Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Convener. Can you just expand a little bit more, following up from a previous question that was asked, and just kind of explain what the council is doing to maximise best use of current stock to meet medical needs? How does the choice-based letting system kind of help aid that, you know, along with officer input to ensure that we are maximising best use of stock? And can you explain as well, during kind of future new build developments, what you will do to ensure that, again, those medical needs will be met, and that, you know, it's not just perhaps some level of, you know, some access that's granted to a property, but actually you will really look to ensure that you kind of future-proof that house for the greatest, for those that experience the greatest physical barriers. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of our existing stock, we do look at the possibility of adapting properties when they become void. We have to balance that out with the need that we have right across the county, particularly in relation to homelessness and thinking about how we meet the needs of the widest population. We do need to collect more information around the types of properties that could be adapted, and to better inform those decisions up front, so that there wouldn't be so much of a delay in terms of making individual decisions about properties, so that we've got a better baseline of information about how we might be able to adapt particular types of properties. But they are ongoing discussions and areas that we're working on as we go through the improvement plan. In terms of our new build, you'll be aware, Councillor, that we have quite a good track record in terms of particular needs housing for new build. We have exceeded our target in some years in terms of accessible housing, and we've got a target for both wheelchair adapted housing and also for kind of general adapted housing, that that not wheelchair adapted but accessible housing. We continue to engage with our housing association partners to deliver that, and also in terms of our own new build programme, we have standard house types for both wheelchair standard and for particular needs housing that allow us to then respond quickly when we've got a property type that can go into a new site.
And just to, again, expand on that a little bit more, you know, I have raised in the past sometimes some of the difficulties that tenants who do have an application in, who are living in accommodation that isn't meeting their most basic needs and the you know, the real challenges that poses. Can you just expand on what improvements have been made to help them throughout that process whilst they're waiting, and what links you're having with the, you know, Health and Social Care Partnership, for example, to ensure that their wellbeing needs are being met?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned earlier that we're looking to stand up a group around better assessing those needs so that we've got a better forecasting of what need is coming through, and that will allow us to respond in advance of there being an acute housing need and to better plan for those needs that are coming up in the future. The other thing that is mentioned within one of the later papers is about our housing service review, and that scenario that you talk about is one of the things that we've been considering quite closely in terms of how we organise our own services and how we make sure that we are able to manage people's circumstances proactively while they're waiting for a house that better meets their needs. So that's something that we're thinking about in terms of how we organise our own services and making sure that we have the resource to allow us to be able to do that.
Any further questions from anyone? No. So we'll move on to comments. Anybody got a comment? Councillor Melville?
Yeah, thanks, convener. One of the worrying things that I picked up in the report is that despite our best efforts to encourage property owners to bring empty homes back into use, the number of empty homes has unfortunately increased. So the kind of carrot approach alone has not been sufficient. And I know that the Empty Homes Officer will be looking at all that, and I was pleased to hear that we're going to take up the Scottish Government funding for that role. But I do just want to take this opportunity to encourage you to be robust with the powers that we have. Where a property has been empty for a long time, it says in the report that we are looking at a CPO as a tool of last resort. But what I would say is that in some instances it might be helpful to put that option on the table in front of a property owner to show them that we mean business about bringing homes back into use and giving people the homes that they need. So I just wanted to take that opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Melville. Anybody else? Further comments? No. Thank you. So we'll move on to the recommendations. I'll not read them out because they're all in front of you in the report. So are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to number 5. House and Service Performance and Improvement Update and Annual Assurance Statement. And again, I'll hand you to Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. So this report provides members with an update on the housing services performance and progress made through the Housing Service Improvement Plan. It also seeks approval for our Annual Assurance Statement, which is a statutory requirement from the Scottish Housing Regulator. The report highlights a number of areas of progress, but acknowledges that there are still some improvements to be made, and this includes in relation to the exceptions noted against the Annual Assurance Statement. I would like to assure members that we have plans in place to address these. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions from anybody? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I'm looking at page 54, Catherine. It's about the antisocial behaviour. And I was just wondering, really, have you been able to identify some of the complexities which are specific to Angus? Because I'm sure there are similar complexities across Scotland at the moment. And I was also wondering whether because there has been quite an increase, I was wondering if you think that there really needs to be increased staffing to deal with this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We do work with other authorities to better understand what people are putting in place elsewhere to deal with similar issues. It is disappointing to see the results in relation to antisocial behaviour. I mentioned in a response to the earlier paper that we're carrying out a housing service review, and again this is one of the things that we're thinking about really carefully in terms of where the resource needs to go and how we think about the complexity of needs that people have, and best be able to put in the resource to manage that. So that is something that will be forthcoming in the coming months in terms of our plans for improvement, and the extent of resource needed to manage antisocial behaviour and all the fallouts from that are at the top of our considerations for that.
Councillor Gall.
Thanks, Convener. It was just on page 53. I noticed that the repairs have fallen, or repairs carried out first time have fallen 30%. but the average time to get to these repairs has almost increased by a working week. Is there a link there that there's a pressure and repairs aren't being done properly the first time round because there's a backlog? The figures seem quite a stark difference on both sides.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the repairs completed right first time, this is predominantly down to reporting and how contractors have been reporting that to us in terms of some of the differences that we're seeing there. I'll maybe hand over to Ewan McCallum, who can give a bit more detail in terms of how that has come through in the figures that we're seeing.
Yep. Hello, thanks. Yes, so there are issues with the current methodology in terms of contractors reporting that, but what I can say is that we are actively looking to improve that reporting mechanism in the new contracts that we're about to put into place in the coming months as well. So there has been an issue identified there. There are areas where the performance is good, but it's a bit of a mixed picture. But certainly that is something that we're going to have a focus on in the coming months, using new systems, putting in digital systems in place to verify that the works has been done right first time.
Councillor Whiteside, thank you, Ewan.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks for the report, Catherine. I noticed that during the last tenant satisfaction survey in 2023, there was 1,000 telephone interviews carried out, which gives you quite a good rate of return. Is that the same process that's going to take place next year when the survey's done again, or are you aiming for an even higher return?
We're still working through the kind of methodology for that, and we would aim to have as high a response as we can. I'll maybe ask Lindsay Day to come in and just give you a bit more detail about what's been put in the contract for the new survey.
Yeah, so we're looking at a mixed methodology approach for the next survey, looking at a mix of face-to-face and telephone interviews with tenants. We're aiming for the same, if not more, so a minimum of 1,000 responses with half face-to-face and half telephone. So just to see if that gives a difference in terms of the different responses from tenants, the different engagement methods that we try.
Councillor Gregg. Oh, and then I'll take Tom O'Brien.
Thank you, Convener. Just on page 52, the table there, which is in Appendix 2, some of the figures between 23 and 24 and 24-25 are exactly the same. Is that because those figures haven't changed, or is there a specific reason for that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The reason for that is because the satisfaction survey is one that we carry out every 3 years. That is the required amount of time that we have to carry out a survey. So that is the scores from the last time we carried out that survey, which is why the figures are the same.
Mr. O'Brien.
Sorry. So under page 46, section 5.1, there's a link to the annual return of the Charter, and it says that electrical installations of fire alarms needs to be done by no later than December 2025 from the regulator. But in the assurance statement, it says by March 2026. I just wonder why there was a difference in the dates. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. There was a change to that date in the time that we were preparing the report, so that is actually an error. The date that's in the annual assurance statement in terms of March 2026 is the correct date. Thank you.
Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if you could explain just how you are going to kind of speed up that void process, especially when the choice-based letting system, as we know, it takes twice as long as the old system to make an allocation. So what will you do to kind of close that gap, given that challenge? And you did touch on the different methods of engagement, but there is a lot of focus on housing online at the moment. And I know that there has been kind of letters placed in different sheltered housing complexes, for example, but actually I think even just having that letter kind of there for them to pick up to actually kind of link into that process is quite difficult. So what will be done as you shift to more of a focus to online?
In terms of the void process, this is something that we're paying an awful lot of attention to at the moment. There are a number of difficulties in terms of bringing void properties back into use, some of them within our control and some of them not, particularly around contractor capacity, some of the difficulties that we see in terms of the complexity of repairs that are needed when properties are becoming void, which is partly down to the age of our stock and sometimes is in relation to the conditions that tenants leave them in. So there's a lot of areas for us to be focusing on in terms of making sure that we're turning those properties round as quickly as possible. This is another thing that we focused on quite heavily in terms of our service review, in terms of how we best organise our own resources, and we also brought a report just recently in terms of the contract for repairs and voids, which is looking to make a change in terms of how we appoint contractors and have specialist contractors for repairs and separate contractors for voids, which we hope will take out some of that bottleneck in terms of that difficulty that we have in terms of prioritising repairs and voids work. So they're the areas that we're focusing on most heavily. In terms of the housing online, I think the letter that you're referring to might have been in relation to digital skills. I'm looking to Lindsay, who might be able to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we are looking at increasing sort of what we've got available, the services we've got available in housing online, but we aren't taking away from other methods that tenants can communicate with us. So we are looking at kind of what tenants are looking for in terms of what services they would like to see on housing in-house and online as part of the development of our digital roadmap for the service. So that's coming to committee in November time. As part of that roadmap, we've got a priority around tenant inclusion, so looking at how we can support tenants who to access housing online, but like I say, it's not in, it won't be replacing kind of the existing methods for tenants to engage with us.
And maybe the other thing just to add there is that our aim is always to provide as many opportunities for people to engage with us as possible, and where we can use online mechanisms that suit the tenants and provide efficiencies for us, then that's great. But the hope is that then frees up officer time to deal with the most complex issues and people who need the most assistance from us. It's not about reducing the staff resource or reducing the availability of resource. It's about making sure that we've got the best solution to suit everybody.
Any further questions? No. Any comments? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, just briefly, it ties in with the last point. I think the walkarounds that I've been taking part in have been really helpful for that. And I think some ideas have come up that communities officers have taken away the tenants participation officers. So that's really what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. It's been really helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you. Just kind of coming back to my question and the example I gave with regards to, for example, perhaps letters being dropped off in sheltered housing complexes to alert people to the opportunities to help them get online. I think they were just placed in like the communal area. So if you have people, and we do have people, residents that aren't able to get out of their home without support, that are quite isolated, that don't have the mobility to even get through to the communal lounge, or indeed attend a walkabout where they might pick up information, then I think that's the type of challenges that I'm hoping that we can perhaps try and overcome, so that we really can kind of reach as far and wide as possible. Thank you.
Okay. Mike.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what was being said there, in the social housing complex where I live, it's all over 60s. I know that's hard to believe, but what has been concerning for a couple of years is that letters personally distributed by the HO are so faint and the font size is so small that the residents are actually unable to read the letters from the council. And even though it's been mentioned several times, there's no recognition or acknowledgement that that is a problem for the tenant.
Thank you for raising that. It's not just over 60s that need glasses. I know from experience. Okay, any other comments?
Sorry, I know that you've already given me, I don't want to push my luck.
Well,
sorry, yeah, I don't want to push my luck, but just to come back to Mike's point, I know that that is an issue that's been raised kind of over the years in terms of the council's font, and I believe that it was perhaps a change in font when council were looking to make savings. It's actually a lighter font because that costs less when it's printed out, and it has been raised that we need to ensure that our font actually is accessible to all users and readers, especially those with kind of visual challenges or impairments. So I think anything that can be done to revisit the font that goes out would be most welcome.
thanks very much. Right, so we'll move on to the recommendations. So one is to, I'm not going to read them all out, but one is to note, 2 is to agree, 3 approve, 4 note and 5 note. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we'll move on to number 6, item number 6, House and Service Improvement Plan. And again, Catherine.
Thanks, Convener. So this report presents the Housing Service Improvement Plan for the period 2025 to 28, and so this builds on the earlier report in terms of the past performance, and that the improvement plan is for approval and then sits alongside the performance management framework, which is for noting. So that improvement plan builds on the progress made over the last year and is structured around the themes outlined in the report, which drive all of our improvements. It sets out a detailed action plan for 2025-26 and stretch aims to be delivered by 2028.
Oh, any questions, anyone? Nope. Oh, Mr. O'Brien.
On page 144, it says the percentage of tenants satisfied with their home when moving in is sitting at 97.86%, but you set a target for 85%. It seems why you would set a lower target.
Yeah, thank you. We're obviously doing well against that target, so we there's some good news there, and that's certainly something that we can reflect on in terms of whether or not we can push that further in terms of our progress there.
Any further questions? Councillor Devine.
A very small one, Catherine. On page 114, there's no, it's under asset management. There's excess percentage of our homes achieve the energy efficiency standard for social housing. I think that's just hasn't been filled in.
Yeah, Ewan, could you tell us what that should say?
Yes, that's a typo. I'm afraid on that one, to give you the exact figure, I would need to come back to you on that one. Yeah.
Any comments from anyone? Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. I think I've said this before, but the scope of this improvement plan is huge, huge. And I take my hat off to the report author for pulling this all together. I don't know how she's done it. The only sort of slight concern is it easy for little things to get lost, or the biggest priority is to get lost in the huge amount of information that we've got there to keep track of.
Yeah, thank you. We've set up a structure that allows us to keep track of each individual action quite carefully. We have a number of delivery groups, and there are other groups that sit underneath them that do the kind of more operational and procedural work. So that allows us to make sure that we've got the right people delivering against each action. But absolutely, there is a lot in there. There's certainly a lot of work for us to continue to do, and we need to make sure that we're keeping on top of the things that really are the biggest priorities for us. Absolutely.
Okay, any further comments before we move on to the recommendations? Okay, so the recommendations is the committee is asked to approve the House and Service Improvement Plan 25 to 28, noting the priorities, actions and outcomes set to drive service improvement. And note the House and Service Performance Management Framework, which supports the delivery of the improvement plan through strengthened performance monitoring, data quality and governance arrangements. Is that agreed? Thank you. So we'll move on to number 7, which is the Housing Revenue Account Capital Plan. And once again, Catherine.
Thank you. So this provides an update on the Housing Revenue Account Capital Plan for the period 2024 to 2029. So this is based on the capital plan that was set at rent setting in February. And this now incorporates finalised capital monitoring for 25 to 26. It sets out how we will invest in housing stock over the medium term to meet the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, energy efficiency standards, and also our wider commitments to net zero and new build.
Right, any questions from anyone? Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks again, Convener. Thanks for the report, and it's well laid out, and we've got the reasons for any underspend, although it's always disappointing to see underspend in new build properties, and I do appreciate the reasons as they're set out in the report. And this is maybe a question for Ian Lorimer. How does the underspend affect future affordability, and can we catch up, if you like, with the delay in new build completions?
Thank you for yourself, Councillor Convener. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so we look at the housing capital position on an annual basis, and we look at we do an annual update to the long-term affordability assessment within that. The main issue in terms of spend that slips, particularly in an environment where inflation is a factor, is that it potentially makes those projects more expensive if there is a delay. But we will build all of that into the next update to the housing capital plan and the long-term affordability assessment that we will make as part of that. So we've managed those issues over many years, Councillor Whiteside, and we'll continue to do that. As I say, it's not ideal because it can have an inflationary impact in terms of what your money can buy now versus what your money can buy further down the line. But we'll continue to manage that through the annual budget setting.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Speed?
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if you could provide an update on the St Thomas site. I know that it was welcome to see the demolition because that just was encouraging.
Sorry,
that's not been the first time somebody shuts me down. But yeah, it would be good if you could, just provide an update on where things are at with St Thomas and what assurance you can give in terms of while it is, I guess, sitting, waiting to be developed on, what will be done to kind of just ensure that it doesn't kind of become overgrown again and all of these things. Thank you.
I'll hand over to Ewan to answer that.
Thanks, Councillor Speed, for the question. Yes, so in terms of St Thomas, as you rightly say, we've just recently completed the demolition of the school building on the site as well. And the plan is to progress with a new build scheme to provide 36 units, and there will be, accessible housing included within that as well. It's due to start on site in early 2027 at the moment. In terms of the short term for that, we do take steps to secure sites, and there is a fence, a gate around that site as well. So we haven't got any individual plans specific for that one, but it's something that we can take forward. We have done it at other sites, Ingalls Court being an example as well. So thank you for that. That's a good reminder.
Thank you. That would be most welcome if you could. Thanks.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councillor Melville.
Sorry, in the same vein, there had been a delay with the work at Inverty Primary School in Monifieth, and I just wondered if we could have a verbal update about that as well.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Melville. That's myself again. So the background to that one specifically has been related to a combination of factors. Primarily, I know we talk quite often about our own internal resource, but actually this one specifically has been more related to external resource. We have got external consultants appointed to do both structural engineering, mechanical and engineering services, and there's been delays in getting information from both of them. We've also had some delays in terms of responsiveness from utility companies as well. That's been a factor that one as well. But we are due to start on site there early in the new year.
Thank you. Anna. Okay, so any comments from anyone? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. In the past, I've asked questions on this, but I just wanted to say I'm still really disappointed that in Forfar there is nothing coming up in the next 4 to 5 years where the housing needs are really quite great. So that's disappointing, and I'll probably continue to say how disappointed I am.
There is a site that's coming up in terms of new build. Councillor Devine, Ewan, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yep, certainly. So within the next 5 years, we are looking within our own internal capacity to take forward a total of 220 new homes across Angus, and specifically talking about Forfar, we've got a really good site. I think it was Old Forfar Academy site in Taylor Street, and we're scheduled to build 43 units on that site, and it's due to start the second half of 2028.
Still quite far away. Thank you.
On what we're on, comments, I think. Anybody got any comments? Nope. Okay, so we'll move on to the recommendations. So the recommendations are all in front of you. I'll not bother reading them out. Are they all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we'll move on to number 8, which is the management of housing debts and write-off policy.
Thank you. This report seeks approval for a formal policy for the management of housing debts and write-offs, covering arrears and other housing-related debts owed by both current and former tenants. Happy to take any questions.
Questions from anyone? Councillor Devine.
Thank you. I know that there's quite a lot of emphasis put on early intervention and trying to help people not to get into debt. So I was quite surprised at 4.3 on page 215 when it says debts with no repayment activity for over 12 months will be subject to enhanced scrutiny. And I was wondering why we would leave it to 12 months, because at that point, people are not going to be able to get out of the bit. And obviously, we're losing a lot of money as well. So I just wondered why it couldn't be shorter, 6 months, 3 months.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I mean, in terms of no payment activity, we're particularly thinking about former tenant arrears when we're talking about accounts that haven't seen any payment for that period of time. In terms of current tenant arrears, we absolutely have a policy and an engagement around early intervention, trying to get in there as quickly as we can to have those conversations. But there are occasions where tenants leave with arrears, and it can be very difficult to collect former tenant arrears. And that's where we have to, at some point, make a decision about whether or not it is value for money to continue to pursue a debt, or whether or not we need to write it off in terms of it being uncollectible and for us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't think it was really totally clear in that paragraph, but yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. Catherine, in the section on the approach for current tenants, which is page 218, there's mention of considering use of a short Scottish secure tenancy. I thought it might be useful for some members who might not be familiar with the differences between the secure tenancy and the short one.
Yeah, certainly. Can I ask Claire, could you come in to just give a bit more detail around when that might be used?
Yeah, no problem. So we haven't used it a lot recently, but in terms of moving or transferring a secure tenancy to a Scottish secure tenancy, we can do it under grounds whereby we maybe have gone through with an eviction for rent arrears, and rather than put somebody through the homeless route, we could reallocate that. We could give them back their tenancy almost and change their secure legal agreement onto a Scottish secure tenancy. We can also do it on grounds where people have being given an antisocial behaviour order, etc., whereby we would put them on a Scottish secure tenancy, where there is more mechanism for us to make sure there's a support plan that goes in place with that, and there's more scrutiny and more reviewing of the support plan that goes alongside. Before then, we would look at whether we would grant a full tenancy back or keep them on that Scottish secure tenancy, which is reviewed regularly.
Any further questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you. Just to pick up on that around antisocial behaviour orders, my understanding is that that's not a tool that we use very often, and possibly there's scope to use it more frequently and effectively. Thanks.
Yeah, it's not something that we have used in recent time to any great extent. Again, that's something that we'll consider more widely through our service review in terms of how we resource and manage that, and the tools that are available to us to ensure that we're using every possible avenue to tackle antisocial behaviour in our communities.
Okay, we'll move on to comments. Oh, are you having a question, Councillor Speed? Right, sorry, question.
Yeah, thank you. Just coming back again to the theme around digital exclusion and accessibility, I wondered if you could just kind of explain in a bit more detail around what has been doing to ensure that we use those other methods of communication and contact with tenants for debt recovery, for example, like face-to-face, but also over the phone, as opposed to like with a person rather than an automated system. Because I know that there has been some changes there currently at this time, and I just wondered if you had like an update on that in terms of the inability to do a card payment over the phone, because that is a concern. Thank you.
Thanks. Could I just ask Lindsay to come in on that, please?
Hi, thanks, Councillor Speed. Yes, so the majority of the contact with tenants is done through the telephone, so it's telephone contact where the tenant would benefit from face-to-face contact or has support needs or complex needs, a face-to-face visits carried out. So we're not actually that far advanced in terms of automation when it comes to contacting tenants through for rent arrears or for any other means. We've recently, or we're ready to introduce a digital direct debit form which will allow tenants to apply for a direct debit online. That won't replace the current forums. We have had to pause kind of processing those current forms just as we set up this new process in the way that they're currently done, but that won't change for tenants who would prefer to use a paper form or who would prefer to phone and make a payment through the contact centre. So all those methods will still remain.
Sorry, yeah, as far as I'm aware at the moment, though, customers are unable to make a card payment over the phone with a person, and they're being transferred to automation.
I think what you might be referring to is the system around card security, and I think Ian has got his hand up, so could maybe come in and get a bit more detail around that.
Yeah, through yourself, Convener. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Speed. Yeah, so there was some industry-wide changes were made in relation to card security, so making card payments from the beginning of this month, which we've had to respond to in terms of our approach. It is still possible in exceptional circumstances to take the card payments via the phone rather than transferring the user to call secure. So we do have a workaround there in the short term. We're actually due to implement another sort of layer to that security from, I think it's from next week. So that will provide a further layer of enhanced security. But longer term, we're going to have to look at possibly voice recognition type options for people who are less able to use a telephone and type in numbers to give their card securely. It's not something that the council has implemented. It is an industry-wide standard change, all with the aim of protecting card users from potential fraudulent activity. So we're doing the right things in terms of protecting card users and following the industry standards, but we do recognise that in some instances that can be a challenge for some users. So we are making some changes, as I say, next week in terms of a further layer of protection and security, but we will probably have to go a little bit further than that, because eventually the ability to take card payments in that way will eventually be switched off entirely. So we'll need to be ready for those further industry changes further down the line. But there is a workaround in the short term, Councillor Speed. I would want to give some reassurance around that, but it's That's only for people who are unable to use our call secure feature. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments? Nope. I'd just like to say I'm pleased to hear, Lindsay, that the digital direct debit form's coming into play, and I'm sure Councillor Melville will be delighted with that too. Thank you. So we'll move on to the recommendations, which is the committee is asked to approve the management of housing debts and writes off policy. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll move on to number 9, wood burners, stoves and open fire chimney policy for Angus Council tenants. I have to say, I think there's been quite a bit of misunderstanding, and the press have been reporting Angus Council as having a, wide-scale wood burning stove ban, which is absolutely not the case. But I'll hand over to Catherine to talk to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This report seeks approval for a new wood burners, stoves and open fire policies for Angus Council tenants and relates only to Angus Council tenancies. It seeks to set a clear and consistent approach for decisions relating to new requests for tenants to install such appliances, and a policy in terms of how they will be monitored and maintained. Thank you.
Oh, that was quick. Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you. The report refers to exceptional circumstances such as remote and rural locations, and obviously in some circumstances a solid fuel heating is much more cost effective, and we know that. There are 14 of the council properties that have these existing solid fuel appliances, so it's coal fires there. How many of them fit into the remote and rural category, if you can tell me that? And likewise, do we know how many of them that is the sole heating appliance in the house?
Yeah, thanks for that. So those 14 are those that is their sole heating. They are not all rural locations. Some of them are within urban areas. We're not proposing that we would, as part of this policy, remove from people who have already got the appliance there, but this sets out how we will ensure that they are maintained correctly, making sure that we have adequate records around the maintenance and upkeep of them. The policy in terms of the future rural locations and exceptions is for new requests.
Just as a quick follow-up, if I may, it's interesting to hear that they're not all in those remote rural settings. I think that the follow-up question that I would have is, if there was a gap between tenancies, would the council be looking to remove a solid fuel appliance and then replace it with something that might meet our current standards? Because that obviously then has a financial impact as well.
Yes, absolutely. If the property became void, we would use this policy to assess whether or not it was reasonable for it to remain in terms of it being the most cost-effective heat source. But if it is not, and particularly for those that are in urban settings, yes, we would be looking to remove it and install a more appropriate heating system.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. It's a small question and hopefully a small follow-up. Angus Council is actively trying to reduce carbon and get to net. Do you know how much carbon there is in the atmosphere in a percent?
I don't have that information. That's certainly something that we could speak to our colleagues.
If you wish, I could tell you. It's currently at 0.04%, and if it drops to 0.02%, all plant life in the world will die off. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Bell.
So I'm just gathering the thoughts there. Thank you, Convener. Yeah, as someone who represents quite a rural area, it's not just about affordability of wood as fuel, it's about resilience when there's a lot of power cuts. And I'm really pleased to see the sensible approach here. And I would hope that if anyone comes looking to acquire or replace a stove in those exceptional circumstances, that resilience is taken into account, because yes, there are public health implications around the use of wood burning stoves and open fires in terms of inhalation and damage potentially to lungs. I get that. However, there is an element of that cold has a negative impact on people's health as well and contributes to cardiac and stroke issues. So it's about taking a sensible approach there. And also my question specifically is around, for anyone who is seeking to have a wood burning stove in a council property under those situations, are you in a position to recommend the standard of appliance that might be required and using accredited traders? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly it's a valid point in terms of that fuel resilience and particularly for rural locations. In terms of standards, there are kind of minimum standards that have to be met in terms of open fire and wood burning stoves, and they have to be maintained with carbon monoxide detectors and so on. We wouldn't be in a position to be able to recommend installers, although there is obviously the Angus Trusted Traders scheme that we would recommend people to if they were looking for further information.
Okay, any further comments? Nope. Okay, so we'll move on to the recommendations. The committee is asked to approve the wood burners, stoves and open fires policy.
Comments.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Nicholl. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I believe the council policy on open fires and wood burning stoves in council houses are correct, but not for their ideas. Most of the council properties with chimneys and fireplaces are usually more than 70 years old, and fireplaces, chimneys, the liners, the mid-brigs and the rooftop chimney stack are predominantly past their sell-by date and potentially dangerous and not fit for purpose. To reinstate the work would mean major inspections and major remedial work, which is not impossible, but cost prohibitive. All the fireplaces and wood burning stoves in Scotland, the emissions in the grand scheme of the thing would be minute. It would not even be a 0.00% and would not seriously affect global warming. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, just following up on Councillor Nicholl's point, a very important factor in these older buildings is that the chimney actually helps in reducing and avoiding damp. Closing up fireplaces typically then introduces a damp and mould problem.
Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to the recommendations. So the committee is asked to approve wood burners, stoves and open fires policy. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Sarah, could you stop the live stream, please?